Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today we're gonna have a fun comparison between Sigma's newest 50mm f1.2 for the L mount and Leica's flagship 50mm f2 APO SL. If you're new to the channel, I am a portrait photographer based out of Miami, Florida, and I primarily shoot with Sony and Leica. I just recently picked up an SL3, and I was in the market for a 50mm, which is my favorite focal length. Sigma actually happened to reach out to me a few weeks ago and asked me if I was interested in reviewing and being one of the first people to actually check out their new 51.2. So I jumped on that opportunity. While that happened, I had purchased a 50 APO SL, and I thought to myself, if I would have known this lens was out, would I have purchased this lens? And to be honest, the answer is probably not, because I love the option of 51.2 and I love the fact that they're almost the same size. But now that I'm here, why not compare them and see if one of these lenses is truly better? Because this lens is $1,400, the Sigma. The Leica is $5,100. It's about $3,800 difference. One's a 1.2, one's an f2. So how do they compare? Now you might be wondering, Alex, why are you comparing the 1.2 Sigma to the f2 APO? Why not the Summilux SL 1.4? And the reality is the Summilux SL 51.4 is massive. It is a tank. I actually owned that lens last year. Great lens, but I just could not consider it because of its size and weight. It is just way too big. These two, though, happen to be the same size. So let's go ahead and compare them and see if the Leica is worth the $3,800 more, or if the Sigma at 1.2 gives you the better value and gives you a Sigma Noctilux. Like we do in all our videos, I'll be providing all the images we compared today for you to download and check out yourself. YouTube compresses these videos, and sometimes when you're comparing two high-end lenses, the details are so small, you need to check them out yourself. So feel free to download the files, do this comparison. Let me know in the comments if your results are different or if you see anything different, and let's have a conversation. But before we dig into the image quality, let's dig into form factor. So like I mentioned, both these lenses are roughly the same size, but they take a different design philosophy. Starting with the Leica, if you look at the Leica 50 f2 APO SL, it follows their new design language for their SL lenses. What I mean by that is there is no buttons, there is no switches. It is a clean, modern design, and the lens is weather sealed and dust proof. This design, I think, is classy, it's good looking, and overall very clean. If you look at Sigma's design, very different. The Sigma 51.2 is very unapologetically Sigma. You got an aperture ring, you got dials, you got switches. It's built well. It's actually built great. It looks like a Sigma lens, it feels like a Sigma lens, and that's not a bad thing because Sigma's latest lenses have been absolutely incredible. What's surprising here is the length of these lenses is almost identical. One's a 1.2, one's an f2. So when you look at the form factor and size, you're not really giving up much going to the 1.2 over the f2. As a matter of fact, the only big difference is the 1.2 is a little bit girthier, but other than that, they feel pretty much the same in the camera. By no means are these lenses small, but the 1.2 being the same size as an f2 is a pretty big difference. So from a form factor and design perspective, there really is no winner. They're both unique in their own way. They both look good, they both feel good, and it's gonna be a preference. So let's go ahead and put these lenses to the side and talk about image quality. For image quality, the only way to do this is a pixel peeping session in Lightroom. So here's what I did. I took out both these lenses and a tripod, and I took pictures of my Cybertruck at the exact same settings, both at f2, and then some images at f1.2, so we can see the difference wide open. I didn't shoot any images above f2 because Leica actually says, and Peter Carbe, the designer of the f2 APO SL, he says that these lenses are designed to be shot wide open, and the performance is optimized to be shot wide open. And I think you're gonna see that the f2 APO SL does great wide open, but that's why I didn't shoot these lenses at f2.8 or f4. All these comparisons will be at f2. All the images you're gonna see have also not been edited with any presets. I have matched the white balance. I have matched the color profile, so I have put the Leica color profile in Lightroom, match the white balances, match the exposures, and in some photos, tweak the shadows to have a better, cleaner exposure, but all settings have been the same on all images. With the ground rules set, let's go ahead and dive into the computer and see if there's a clear winner between these two lenses. Okay, let's kick this off. So on the left-hand side, we have the Sigma at f2.0, and on the right-hand side, we have the APO. And one thing you're gonna notice very quickly is the APO is letting in more light, or at least here on the grip, this area looks a little bit brighter. Overall though, very similar images. I think again, if you look at the APO, maybe a little bit more magenta rendering, and the Sigma is definitely warmer and maybe a little bit greener as well. As a reminder, these are the exact same settings you can see here in the top, and also the exact same white balance. So all the differences in color will be by the lens. Zooming in though, as far as sharpness goes, they are both extremely sharp at f2.0. I don't see any purple fringing or chromatic aberration in this image. And if you look at the background blur, I think the Sigma is a little smoother and creamier. The Leica does have harder edges, but everybody that knows about the APO Summicron knows that the bokeh isn't the smoothest because the lens is really kind of aimed at creating the sharpest image. If you go down here to the bokeh on the right-hand corner, you can see even more. The bokeh on the APO is just more jagged. Again, more detail on the edges versus the Sigma is smoother. Zooming back out, looking at it from this perspective, I think both images look extremely similar. But how do these images look if we were to compare 1.2 versus 2.0? Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Here with the same settings, you can see that 1.2 just obliterates the background. You can see how creamy it is. And what's pretty impressive is if you zoom in at 1.2, the Sigma is still extremely sharp and still not showing any signs of chromatic aberration or fringing. And this is pretty impressive for a 1.2 lens. Now, the APO is definitely sharper here at f2, but just look at the background. That is what you pay for when you get a 1.2 lens. Zoom back out, you can see a little bit more of the differences, but let's go to another set of images. Here, again, on the left-hand side, we have the Sigma, and on the right-hand side, we have the Leica. Very similar. The Leica is letting in a little bit more light. It does look a little bit more magenta and cooler, and the Sigma is looking warmer and I think a little bit greener, I would say. Let's go ahead and zoom in. We can see that the sharpness here is pretty good on both lenses. One thing you're going to notice is there is light reflecting off this filter here on the Fuji, and on the APO, because it's an APO lens, it's just like a clear, I want to say like a strip of light. On the Sigma, you're getting some color cast here on this filter, which I'm not sure it's because of the lens, just because it's not an apochromatic lens. That's my theory on how this kind of glare is rendering. But overall though, sharpness is pretty good on both lenses. On the Sigma, you can start seeing a little bit of green fringing here in the top. You also see it a little bit on the Leica right here, but I think it's safe to say that the Leica is a hair sharper and maybe a hair more micro contrast here in the leatherette. But when you zoom out and you're not pixel peeping, I think both images look great. Again, the Sigma has creamier bokeh and the Leica just has more jagged edges. So kind of a toss-up on what you think is best or preference, but let's look at another set of images. Here we have another set of images of my brand new Cybertruck, and this is actually an interesting image, and from this perspective it might not look as interesting, but taking a look at this image, both shot again at f2, same settings. Zooming in, you're gonna see that both actually look really good. You can see all the the imperfections of the Cybertruck, I should say, or all the streaks from my bad attempt at cleaning it. But as far as sharpness goes, they both look very similar. It's hard to say one is sharper over the other with this image, but the reason why I say it's interesting, if you zoom out, you can see that the sun here is causing a flare on the APO Summicron. You can see some of those flares here on the bottom of the image. What's interesting is the Sigma isn't flaring, but if you zoom in on the right-hand side, there's definitely a color cast here on the Sigma versus the APO has more contrast. So even though the Sigma doesn't necessarily have a lens flare like the APO does retain more contrast here in the area where the lens is kind of flaring. So Interesting, kind of a toss-up on what you prefer. I don't think there's a right answer here, but definitely a difference in how these lenses handle this harsh direct light hitting the optical elements. Looking at another set of images here, and I thought the Cybertruck was a perfect thing to shoot here because it's just reflecting light, it's shiny. I wanted to see how the lenses were going to respond, how they were going to autofocus. Overall, they just nailed focus every single time. That's a testament to the SL3. And also, I mean, just the resolution and detail here is incredible. So on the left-hand side, we have the Sigma. On the right-hand side, we have the APO. And it's hard to say one is better over the other on some of these images. Like in this one, I think they both look tack sharp. They both look good. Again, the Sigma is warmer and the APO is cooler. Something you can fix easily with a white balance correction. But as far as detail goes, both these lenses are doing a phenomenal job. Here on the left-hand side, again, we have the Sigma. On the right-hand side, we have the APO. Zooming into the Cybertruck. Here, they're both tack sharp. Again, it's hard to fault one. I do think the APO just has more oomph on the detail here. I'm not sure if this is considered micro contrast, but you can definitely see, I don't know what it is, just like maybe a hair more contrast or detail with the APO lens. And I mean, you still see it on the Sigma, but maybe it's the brightness of the APO that makes this text kind of stand out more in the details of the text. Again, I'm just nitpicking here because they both look sharp. They both look solid. I think the APO does look a hair, like it has something more on this image. On this image here, again, Sigma on the left, APO on the right. Zooming in, it's pretty impressive here how both these lenses are doing really good with chromatic aberrations and purple fringing, considering it's such a high contrast image. From a sharpness perspective, I think they both look equally the same. Zooming out, kind of hard to tell them apart. As a matter of fact, on this one, I did take an image at 1.2 to kind of show the difference. So let's go ahead and look at that. So here we have the Sigma at 1.2 on the left, at 1.2 and the APO on the right. And I think what's super impressive about the Sigma is at 1.2, you still retain crazy amount of sharpness and detail, and you just have way more stops of light. So that makes this lens such an appealing lens. But let's look at one more image and then let's wrap up this comparison. So on this image, again, we have the Sigma on the left, the APO on the right. This image, we don't have any flares coming in, and we're gonna see a little bit of the same thing we saw in the previous one, where when we zoom in here, from a sharpness perspective, I think they're both there. They both look very sharp, tons of detail, hard to tell them apart. Even though the Sigma isn't flaring, you can see that there is a little bit of ghosting and hazing here where the sun is just directly hitting the lens. And the APO just, in this image, completely wins it as far as contrast and retaining all that information without kind of losing it because the sun is hitting the lens directly. And you can see it here when you zoom out as well. It just retains all the detail and contrast. So the APO is a better lens, but the question is going to be, is it worth it to you? So let's go ahead and wrap up this video. So there you have it. What do you think? I think when you really pixel peep and you're doing what we just did, 200%, really analyzing the image, the 50 APO SL is a hair sharper. It does render, I think, a little bit more micro contrast. And as a whole, if we're basing the results off of that, the 50 APO SL at f2 is still a better lens. But I think the reality is it's such a tight comparison. And yes, it's a little bit sharper. And yes, there's a little bit more micro contrast, but we're pixel peeping at 200%. The average person won't be able to see the difference. As a matter of fact, when you edit the images, you can probably add a little bit more contrast and probably achieve the same look with the Sigma and have the flexibility of shooting at f1.2, which is massive for low light. And it gives you more creative control if you want to blur out the background at f1.2 or stop it down to f2, f2.8. You have more options, and because of the form factor, they're the same length and almost the same weight. I personally like the Sigma 51.2. So again, is the Leica better? Yes, it is. But by 1%, maybe 2% by hairs. But I like the flexibility and the overall value you get with the Sigma. And the fact that it's $3,800 cheaper means you can probably buy a set of lenses and truly build out your SL kit and not sacrifice on image quality. Guys, these comparisons are for us photographers, for us YouTubers, for us nerds, because the reality is any modern lens, any lens that's been created in the last few years is going to be good enough for any professional work. And the differences are going to be so small that only we will be able to see it. So don't limit yourself creatively because you don't have a 50 APO or you don't have the latest Sigma. If you have a modern lens, you can do magic with it. You can be extremely creative. So don't limit yourself and truly enjoy what we have, because as photographers now, the options we have are limitless, and it's truly a great time to be alive. As always, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash the like button, please hit the subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys. Peace.